Good, y'all? It's Classic MMA, and today I'll be doing my definitive UFC GOAT list. This is a video I've been working on for a while now. It's not easy to make a top 30 fighters of all time video, but finally I got it done, and I think it's time, to get this out here. So I think what we should start with first is my criteria. So how I value, greatness in the sport. Quality of wins, great wins. So I split this up into, so there's great wins. So great wins are like, for example, like Volk having Max Holloway, and like a solid one would be like TKZ or Darren Elkins. Quantity of wins. So, if you got, so maybe you don't have a ton of great wins, but you got just a ton of solid wins where you're beating all kinds of guys over multiple generations, like a Jose Aldo, for example. Or context of wins. So when you beat them, did you beat them in their prime, or did you beat them when they were washed? Like, did you beat them when they were injured, and then you lost in the rematch? Like, what happened here? Stylistic mismatch. If they fought, like, if they took tough fights, so let's say like a primary striker takes a fighter against a tough wrestler, primary grappler, and schools him. That's pretty great. Look, I'm not gonna lie. Title wins, not defenses, wins. I don't think it matters. Defenses don't matter, because that just takes a number off. Because that either takes off your first time getting the belt, which should be a title win, or let's say you lose your belt but then get it back like Volk. Then now you have a new set of defenses. But I think that's stupid. So we're just gonna call it. We're gonna do title wins. Double champ. I don't think double champ's that important, but I do think double champ's a nice look. Just depending on context and stuff. Long win streaks with context, like Islam's 16 fight win streak, Anderson Silva's 16 fight win streak, like those kind of long win streaks that just show you're one of the best in the world. Losses in your prime or losses you don't get back. So if you get a loss like in your prime, then that counts. That counts against you heavily. Like, or essentially losses that you don't get back. So let's say you're 1-1 with the fighter. So like, what's the rivalry? It's 1-1. Like, let's just put this. Gaethje and Poirier, I count both their wins over each other basically the same way. I don't hold the losses against either of them. I hold the wins, equally. And then judges, this is something that people they're going to think I'm Lucas Tracy Maxon with this one, but judges get fights wrong. Robberies still have to be there as losses. They have to be there as, robberies, don't get me straight, they have to be there as losses for the fighter who wasn't given the decision. If I'm able to go on UFC.com and see that as a loss for you, I have to put it on here. But I'm able to put an asterisk on it, put robbery, and then I'm not going to count it for a win as for the person who won. And then my final one, this might make some people mad. No PED cheats on this list. Sorry, John Jones. We don't do PEDs around here. You do drugs, you do performance-enhancing drugs in a sport where your whole point of fight is to hurt another person. Sorry, you don't get to be on the list. So, alright, criteria, that should make sense. I know it's kind of long, but I have to get out of the way. Alright, and then for honorable mention, some guys that could have made the list, but I didn't put on here. Brandon Moreno. Moreno has he has a win, does he have 2 wins over Figgy or 1 win? I can't remember, but he has at least 1 win over Figgy. Yeah, 2. Yeah, and then the rest of his resume isn't that great, but you could argue him in there because of 2 wins over Figgy. Also has some sneaky wins over like Amir Albazi and Steve Erceg in there. TJ Dillashaw, I would put him on here, but if John Jones ain't gonna be here, you're the king of EPO. You're definitely not gonna be here. Like, what are we talking about? Matt Hughes. Honestly, Matt Hughes, low-key could have been on here. He has a pretty great resume. He's an unk, but has a lot of title wins. Has some wins over some really good guys like BJ Penn. Has a win over a young GSP. Like, Matt Hughes is definitely up there. Frankie Edgar. Like, Frankie. Oh, wait a minute. Frankie Edgar is actually on this list. Ignore that. I might have forgotten. Frankie Edgar's on this list. Don't worry. Cain Velasquez. If, the injuries didn't happen, Cain would have for sure been like a top 20 all-time fighter. Tyron Woodley. If it wasn't for the fall-off, would have definitely made it on here. Bilal Muhammad. Actually has a pretty decent resume. I mean, the Leon win isn't aging the best, but he's beaten a lot of welterweights, so, and his losses aren't that bad. So let's get on number 30, opening the list. We got Dustin Poirier. So this is the only fighter on here, though, who never won a belt. His great wins. He beat Max Holloway twice. One's kind of a tadpole win, so I don't count it as much, but that second fight, they fought for an interim belt at lightweight in 2019, and Dustin Poirier took Max's 14-fight win streak. Like, that has to count for something. the first Justin Gaethje win. I think that's his other great win, honestly. Like Justin Gaethje, a fighter who's a two-time interim champ, beat guys like Tony Ferguson, beat Dustin as well. Like has a lot of great wins on his resume. His only loss to great fighters like Max, Khabib, Charles in his prime. Like that's a great win for Dustin. Then he has some solid wins. Diego Ferreira, ranked level contender. Bobby Green, always floating around the top 15, especially in his prime. Jim Miller, another guy floating around the top 15. A former champion, Anthony Pettis. Well, not the peak for peak best version of Anthony Pettis. Still a pretty solid version of him. So Eddie Alvarez, an older version of Eddie Alvarez, but still a pretty decent version of him. I believe this is around like the same Eddie that beat Gaethje around this time, so a pretty good win for Poirier. Dan Hooker, Dan Hooker, I believe he was on a pretty decent win streak at this time. He was on a what 3-fight win streak. Yeah, he was on a 3-fight win streak, and Dustin beat him in one of the most entertaining fights ever. So you gotta count for something. Now this is controversial. I count both the Conor wins as solid wins. I'm sorry, but that was not a peak version of Conor McGregor. Still a good version, but not a great version of Conor McGregor. So I count it still 2 wins over a former champ in Conor, or double champ, but wins over Michael Chandler. I mean, Michael Chandler when he was giving everyone tough fights. I know, it's kind of funny. And then the BSD win, that's the final one I wanted to mention. That ages pretty well for Poirier here, BSD since then's went on like a 4-fight win streak, so, and is now top 5 in the lightweight division. So I'd say that aged pretty well. Then his only losses are to TKZ when he was a tadpole. I think he was like 22 years old when he fought TKZ. And this is like featherweight Poirier when he was like a primary grappler. Cub Swanson, another kind of a tadpole loss, just lost to Cub Swanson when he was young. And then here's what he has a lot of losses. Dustin has a pretty great resume, but these losses hold him back a lot. Conor, he was a great version of himself when he fought Conor the first time, and he lost. He got knocked out. Michael Johnson, he got slept out cold by Michael Johnson when he was in his physical prime. But then after that, after those questionable couple losses, or the Conor loss isn't even questionable because it was a prime Conor McGregor, but besides the Michael Johnson one, I mean, he lost to pretty great guys. Khabib, all-time great. You'll see where he lands. Charles, I mean, the best submission artist in the history of the UFC, a top 3 lightweight ever. Justin Gaethje, a guy he has a win over. Islam Makhachev, legit. I'm not going to spoil anything, but let's just say he's pretty high up there. And Max, another guy who I'm not going to spoil anything, but he's pretty high up there as well. And he also has 2 wins over Max, so. Or I'm more counting 1-1, honestly. I mean, I know that's because the first one was literally Max's debut on like 2 days' notice. So, I consider him 1-1, but if you want to consider it 2-1 Poirier, you do you. No title wins, that holds him back a bit. Longest win streak forward, and never really dominant win streak, but beat a lot of good guys over his career. Beat 4 former champions, and as a long UFC veteran, was pretty great from the time he was 25 to the time he was 36 when he retired. So overall UFC record of 22-9. Overall, Dustin Poirier is a great fighter to kick off this list with. So number 29, Jan Blachowicz. Don't know why he's taking so long to load in. So Jan Blachowicz, honestly, a lot of people don't put him on these lists, but I think he's pretty underrated. Honestly, he has a really great resume. Let's dive into it. Great wins. He beat Israel Adesanya when Israel Adesanya was undefeated. He took Israel Adesanya's undefeated record, snatched that thing from him. Said nope. A prime, and you could say, oh, he didn't cut the weight, right? He didn't make the weight right. Guess what? He moved up to 205. He was a favorite in that fight, and Jan Blachowicz beat him. So, yeah. Dominic Reyes. I know Dominic Reyes isn't in his best form currently, but if we look back, this is when Dominic Reyes was coming off the John Jones fight, where he beat John Jones, the PED cheat, the guy that casuals call the greatest of all time. He beat him. And then Jan Blachowicz proceeded to KO him and absolutely massacre him in 2 rounds. So, of course, that's a great one. As a big underdog as well. There's some solid wins. Jared Cannonier. Well, the light heavyweight version of Jared Cannonier wasn't that great. He would go on to, move down and become a top 5 level middleweight. So, Jared Cannonier is pretty great. And he was still ranked level at the time, so he was a pretty solid win. Jimmy Manua. Jimmy Manua. Manuel, I can't remember how to say this guy's name. He was a top 10 ranked light heavyweight who gave a lot of tough guys fights, beat guys like OSP in his prime, beat guys like Corey Anderson. It was kind of just like a ranked level light heavyweight. Alex Gustafsson, He beat Alexander, or no, he lost Alexander Gustafsson. I was reading the wrong side of the screen. My bad. Nikita Krylov. Honestly, a win that aged pretty decently is Nikita Krylov would also go on to become like a top 10 level light heavyweight. So pretty good, great win. Luke Rockhold. Not a great version of Luke Rockhold, I won't lie, but still a version of Luke Rockhold, a former champ that he beat. Knocked him out. Pretty nice. Jacare Souza. Light heavyweight version, not the middleweight version the guys like Whitaker beat, but still a pretty solid win. And the Corey Anderson win, which Corey Anderson was honestly a pretty underrated fighter in his prime. Like now he's went to the PFO and he's smoked everyone there, so he's pretty great. And then finally he has a win over Rakic, which at the time I believe Rakic was on a pretty long win streak. Yeah, at the time Rakic had only lost in the UFC to Volkan Oezdemir and was on a 2-fight win streak. And Blachowicz, well, you could call it a leg injury fluke, but we all know Jan was gonna win that fight, so I count that. And then for his losses, this is the kind of similar to Poirier, holds him back a little bit. Jimmy Manua, I mean he has a win over Jimmy Manua, so I don't count that much against him. Corey Anderson also has a win against him, so I don't count that against him. Gustafsson, not a bad win. Gustafsson had close fights with DC and John Jones, but was a bit overrated over his career. Patrick. Yeah, bro. Who else loses to Patrick here? Patrick. Yep. Thiago Santos, not a horrible loss. And then at his peak, lost to Glover Teixeira. Not too bad, but it's like a 43-year-old for Glover. Had a close fight with Pereira, which I don't really count against him at all, to be honest, because Pereira is one of the greatest to ever do it. And then his last fight, or second to last fight, Carlos Ulberg was a robbery. So I believe he beat Carlos Ulberg. Then some of the other stuff he's done, longest win streak, he went on a 5-fight win streak, has 2 title wins, beat 2 former champs, and overall has a UFC record of 12 wins, 8 losses, 2 draws. So not too bad. Jan Blachowicz is honestly pretty great. Next on the list, Bobby Knuckles Whitaker. So a shorter resume here, but still a guy I think deserves to narrowly be on the list. Has 2 great wins over a prime Yoel Romero, who was, he was the soldier of God. No one wanted to mess with him. Like Yoel Romero would legit just he would walk you down and do whatever he wanted to you, essentially. He'd walk you down and do it himself. Like, the way dudes was describing King Von, that was basically Yoel Romero in 2017, 2016. When he was just flying knee and everyone out cold. And Whitaker beat him twice. I know the second fight's controversial. You could argue it's a draw, but if anyone was to win that fight on rounds, Whitaker won 3 rounds in that fight. So, he won 3 rounds in that fight. So, duh. And then the first fight, he beat Yoel very narrowly, close fight, but he did beat him. Everyone thought he beat him. Some solid wins. Got the Brad Tavares, classic unk of the division. Uriah Hall, another unk, but ranked level guy. Derek Brunson, pretty good win, honestly. Derek Brunson was always floating around like that top 7 to top 5-ish level. Jacare Souza, pretty solid win. Darren Till, when Darren Till was still in a pretty good version of himself. Jared Cannonier, a prime Jared Cannonier, who would go on to become top 3 and fight for the belt. Kelvin Gastelum, when he was still pretty good, nearly knocked out Adesanya. Marvin Vettori, when he was like top 3. Paulo Costa, when he was like top 5, top 6, an older version, but still pretty good. And the Ikram Aliskerov fight, which I believe will age very well, as Ikram has been looking pretty nice in the UFC besides losing to Whitaker. And the only losses Whitaker really has is to Wonderboy when he was a tadpole, like second fight in the UFC at welterweight. Like that was not the best. That was a very young version of Robert Whitaker. I don't count it against him at all. Adesanya twice, which Adesanya is pretty great. DDP, which DDP is pretty great. One of the best middleweights ever. Hamzat Chimaev, not a bad loss at all. That dude's going to end up being one of the goats of the sport. And the Rainier de Ritter fight, which, yeah, I don't know about that one. But besides that, the rest of his losses are pretty excusable. 2 title wins, not the most, but it's not bad. Went on a 9-fight win streak at middleweight, which just shows he was at one point the best middleweight on the planet for like a year. Never beat a former champ, which holds him back a little bit, and then 17 wins and 7 losses. Overall, Robert Whitaker has a pretty decent resume. Obviously, lacks some great wins, but he beat pretty much everyone at middleweight not named Israel Adesanya for a long time. So, I think he fits at 28. Number 27, Henry Cejudo. This is controversial. People might have him higher. Now you might say, dude, he beat DJ. How does he have no great wins? You're smoking something if you think he won that fight against DJ. I'm sorry. DJ won that fight. it doesn't count. Simple as that. So he doesn't have any great wins. His solid wins are over Jussier Formiga, which is underrated. Formiga beat Davison Figueiredo like a year before he became champ. Sergio Pettis, who's a pretty decent flyweight. TJ Dillashaw, which is, I don't count it that much because this was when TJ was cutting him. There's a reason there's the edits of TJ Dillashaw cutting weight for that fight. That's all I'm gonna say. The Marlon Moraes fight, which didn't age particularly too well, but before that fight, Marlon was a killer, and I think it counts as a pretty good one. And then Dominic Cruz fight, I don't count it that much as Cruz was coming off a ton of injuries, so still a decent one though. Lost to Mighty Mouse when he was in like his third fight, not too bad. I'm more of a tadpole loss. And then he lost to Aljo when he was old, coming back off retirement. Lost to Marab when he was old. Lost to Song Yadong when he was old. And definitely lost to Peyton Talbot when he was old. So really has no losses in my opinion. At least ones that matter within the context of things. Has 4 title wins. A six fight win streak was his longest in the UFC. Beat 3 former champs: Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, and I'm forgetting the other one. Has overall UFC record of 10-6, and his other accolades. I mean, this is the main thing that gets him this high because his resume is pretty mid. But double champ defending, if you're a double champ and you defended both belts, yeah, you get a spot on the top 30 essentially automatically. Like that's a pretty hard thing to accomplish no matter who you're fighting. And then the early retirement has to take away some points. Like you should have just stayed dipped from the sport. I still don't think his resume would have been particularly amazing, but it would have been better than this. So Henry Cejudo, he deserves to be here, but not too high. Next on the list, number 26, Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz has honestly became a little underrated in recent years, as dudes are saying that he beat a bunch of jobbers, that he was a mid-fame machine. But he actually has a pretty decent resume. Let's get into it. Beat Joey B twice. Joseph Benavidez is honestly one of the most underrated fighters in UFC history. Never capture a belt. Like so he lost to Dominic Cruz at bantamweight in the WEC. But in the UFC, so Dominic Cruz beat him twice, once in the WEC, I believe. But, besides losing to Dominic Cruz at flyweight, he would legit beat everyone at flyweight for years besides Demetrius Johnson, including Henry Cejudo. Then still, the only guys that, even as an old man, he lost to Figueiredo, but other than that, he was still beating, as an old man, Joey B was still beating guys like Alex Perez. Like, Joey B is one of the, if you look at his record, it's pretty insane. Mighty Mouse. Dominic Cruz beat Mighty Mouse when he was still doing construction, so I can't count it too much, but still a decent win. Or I say a great win just because of how good of a fighter Mighty Mouse became, so it has to admit something. But I do think it's a pretty great one to have Mighty Mouse on your resume, no matter what version it was. It was still a title level Mighty Mouse. TJ Dillashaw. If you look at the context of this one, you realize how great it is. Because Dominic Cruz is coming off a 5-year layoff, coming off a million injuries, against TJ Dillashaw, who's the king of EPO, doing steroids all the time. And Dominic Cruz beat him. It wasn't a robbery. Dominic Cruz beat him. Anyone with a pair of eyes could have seen Dominic Cruz beat TJ Dillashaw. So I'd say that aged pretty well for him. Then his solid wins. He got to Uriah Faber twice. We don't count Uriah Faber too much around here. Who did Uriah Faber ever beat? But he's still a guy that was a WEC champ. Beat a lot of good guys in the UFC at bantamweight and featherweight. So not a bad one at all. Casey Kenny, ranked level bantamweight. Pedro Munoz. Even as an old man, Dominic Cruz actually pulled up a win over Pedro Munoz, who was like a ranked level bantamweight. So as an old man coming off a million injuries, he still pulled out that win. And then his losses, he has a loss to Uriah Faber as a tadpole into the WEC, which he would proceed to beat him twice after, so it doesn't matter. Cody Garbrandt, this is his only real counting loss to him, and it doesn't age well. Cody Garbrandt, since that fight, has went 3-7, I believe. So yeah, that's one thing that does hold Cruz back. Having just a loss in your prime to coming off one of the best performances of your career against TJ Dillashaw to get absolutely smoked by Cody Garbrandt, yeah, it just doesn't age well. The Henry Cejudo fight, I don't really count it against him because he was old, coming off a 3-year layoff, and he was still making it competitive with Cejudo until the early stoppage. And then he lost it. He got head kicked out cold by Cheeto, but it was when he was very old and washed, so I don't count it against him. And then overall, Dominic Cruz, he has pretty good amount of title wins. Has four in the UFC, 3 in the WEC, so pretty good title wins. Has a 5-fight win streak in the UFC, 12 if you count the WEC. I'm not going to count it too much, but still, a 12-fight win streak at bantamweight. It's pretty nice. Because I count these WEC guys for the lower weight classes because they didn't exist in the UFC. The WEC's bantamweight was division was the only bantamweight division, was the highest level bantamweight division until the UFC merged. And then Dominic Cruz beat 4 former champs and then had an overall UFC record of 7-3. Honestly, if it wasn't for injuries, Dominic Cruz really could have been a GOAT. His injuries just really held him back a lot, but still a pretty great fighter. Beat a lot of great guys. Has a lot of title wins. So one of the greatest bantamweights of all time for sure. Number 25, Frankie Edgar, a guy who I feel is actually pretty underrated. Like if you look at his wins, so great wins, BJ Penn 3 times. A guy who myself included, love to count his GSP as one of his best wins, and Frankie Edgar beat him as well 3 times. So pretty good. Chad Mendes. Chad Mendes is a guy who, if you look at his resume and his peak, was legit demolishing everyone else at featherweight up until this point, besides Jose Aldo, and Frankie Edgar beat him. So besides Jose Aldo and Conor McGregor, and Frankie Edgar beat Chad Mendes, so a pretty good win. As a solid win, even as an old man, he was still beating a guy like Yair Rodriguez. Like, he beat Yair Rodriguez, and this was his featherweight days, not even his lightweight days. This was his featherweight days. He beat Yair, who was this insane young up-and-coming prospect, and finished him. Pretty insane. Beat Charles Oliveira. Obviously a tadpole young version of Charles Oliveira, but still a very good version of Charles Oliveira. Beat Gray Maynard, a guy who I believe was undefeated in the UFC up to that point. So, beat Sean Sherk. Sean Sherk, former lightweight champion. Pretty good win, honestly. A bit of an unk win, but still a win. Beat Cub Swanson 2 times. A prime Cub Swanson, who was, around the top 5 of featherweight, and beat him twice. Uriah Faber, beat the featherweight version of Faber. A pretty great version of Faber, so. Jeremy Stevens, Pedro Munoz, all ranked level guys. He even has wins at bantamweight. That's crazy. He has 3 generations of wins. He has his wins at lightweight, back in the late 2000s or early 2010s. Has some wins in the mid 2010s at featherweight. Then as an old man in his 40s, got a couple wins at bantamweight. So pretty nice. Then for his losses, he has a loss to Gray Maynard early in his career, and he also has a win over Gray Maynard, so I cancel it out. Has 2 losses to Benson Henderson, which I don't count, as I believe both fights were robbery. I believe both fights should have went to Frankie Edgar. And then his only real losses are to Jose Aldo twice. He only lost twice to Jose Aldo. It's not bad. And then in terms of his unk losses, when he was an unk, he lost to Ortega when he was 36. Lost to Max when he was 38 for the belt. Lost to TKZ when he was 38. Got flying kneed out cold by Sandhagen when he was 39. Lost to Cheeto when he was 40, and Chris Gutierrez when he was 41. So I don't really count any of those unk losses. And then for his title wins, 3 title wins, longest win streak of 5. Not a super dominant win streak, but also a couple robberies in there. Which if the judges got it right, he would have had a much longer win streak. And he beat 4 former champs. So honestly, Frankie Edgar is a pretty great guy. UFC record 18-11, pretty great fighter. Let's move on. Number 24, Conor McGregor. One might be a little controversial as he doesn't have the craziest resume on paper, but let me just read it to you. Great wins. Beat Jose Aldo. He beat Jose Aldo when he was on a 20-fight win streak. I'm sorry, you can call it a fluke, but he landed a right hand that sent Jose Aldo out cold. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't a fluke. Beat a guy on a 20-fight win streak. That's crazy. Beat Chad Mendes. At this point, Chad Mendes had only lost to Jose Aldo and, arguably beat him once. So Conor beat Chad Mendes. Knocked him out cold. Pretty sick. Dustin Poirier, a young version of Dustin Poirier, not the best version of Dustin Poirier, but still a very decent version of Dustin Poirier featherweight. Max Holloway, tadpole version of Max when he's in his 3rd fight in the UFC, but still a pretty decent version of Max. Dennis Seaver, ranked level guy. Nate Diaz, lost to him once, but got the loss back and beat him. And beat him convincingly. Eddie Alvarez, won his 2nd belt, beat a champion in Eddie Alvarez, pretty nice. Then even, kind of washed Eric Connor, still beat up Donald Cerrone when he was coming off a 3-fight win streak, so not too bad. And in terms of his losses, he lost to Nate Diaz when he was short notice up a weight class, so I don't count it as much. He lost to Khabib, which I do count as Khabib, as that was a prime version of McGregor. And then he lost to Dustin twice when he was this kind of injured, unmotivated version of himself, so I don't count those against him. Overall, Conor has 2 title wins, has the longest win streak. His longest win streak in the UFC was 7. Beat 4 former champs, and overall his UFC record 10-4. And then other accolades, he's a double champ. Didn't defend either belt, but he did win belts in 2 weight classes. So Conor also has a pretty good resume. Beat a lot of great guys, or not a lot, but beat a couple great guys that really matter. So I think Conor deserves number 24. Number 23, Davison Figueiredo. You know, one of the flyweight goats. I mean, he has to be here. Great wins. He beat Pantoja. He beat Pantoja right before like a year or two before he got the belt. Like he beat Pantoja convincingly, dropped Pantoja, a guy who's went on to become the second best flyweight ever. Figgy beat him, and then Brandon Moreno, a guy who doesn't make my list personally, but a guy who has 2 wins over Figgy. But you know, Figgy beat him once as well. Has solid win over John Moraga, ranked level flyweight. Tim Elliott still kicking. Joey B, not the version of Joey B that Mighty Mouse and Cruz beat, but still pretty decent version of Joey B. Beat Alex Perez, ranked level flyweight, top 5-ish, top 10, Even at bantamweight as an unk, beat guys like Rob Font, Cody Garbrandt, Marlon Cheeto Vera, Monto Jackson, all ranked level guys, not bad. Then his only losses are really to Jussier. He lost to Formiga. It was weird, but yeah, he did lose to Formiga. He just got wrestled. Not a great aging loss, but Formiga wasn't bad either, so I don't hate on it too much. Brandon Moreno twice, so I think Brandon Moreno, he wins that trilogy. I just think Davison Figueiredo has a much better resume, which is why he's here and Moreno's not. He has a loss to Peter Yan. That was when he was on a 3-fight win streak at bantamweight. He lost to Yan, not bad at all, but just lost to Yan. And then he lost to Corey Sandhagen, and by that point, I think Davison Figueiredo was getting a little old. 37, broke his knee, yeah, he looked a little old, man. In the Umar fight, not on here, but I don't really count that against him either. He's very old now. Title wins, I mean, he has 4 title wins, has a longest win streak of 5, beat 4 former champs, and was just the boogeyman of flyweight, absolutely demolishing people. Has a UFC record of 14, 5-1, and his other accolades, I mean, has wins in multiple divisions and still picks up wins nowadays. So Figgy's pretty great, man. I think he deserves to be on here. Next on the list, Aljamain Sterling. I don't like this guy, but let's get this straight. I do not like this guy, but he has to be on here. He is one of the best bantamweights ever. His great wins are over Corey Sandhagen, who's a guy who's just been winning at bantamweight for years, beating pretty much everyone except the champion. So pretty great win. Has a win over Peter Yan. I count the second fight as a win. I know some people want to call robbery. I hate to say it, but rounds 1, 2, and 3, Aljo won clearly off back takes. Round 4 and 5, Yan won convincingly, and then round 1 was close, but Aljo outstruck him, and just was neither of them landed much damage. So to the criteria, the effective striking went to Aljo. So Aljo won a close fight against Yan, which is aged pretty well for him, all things considered. Solid wins. Renan Barao, an older version of Renan Barao, but still former champ. Jimmy Rivera, I think he was top 5 at one point bantamweight. Pedro Munoz, Triple C, an old kind of washed version of Triple C coming off retirement, but still a decent version. Calvin Kattar at featherweight when he was like top 10. Didn't age the best, but still not bad. And then the Brian Ortega one, not too bad either. He's like a top 5 level featherweight at the time. Then his losses, some questionable ones here. Brian Caraway, who's that? Mate, you bloody lost Brian Caraway. Rafael Assunção, not a bad loss. Assunção beat a lot of great guys. Marlon Moraes, got chinned. Didn't age the best for him either. Lost to Sugar Sean O'Malley. Didn't age the best for him either, honestly, because as a grappler, you would think he'd be able to stylistically cook O'Malley, but he just didn't. So, and then Mobzar just got out grappled. So not the best. He has a lot of losses. I won't lie, but still not horrible losses, I guess. Has 4 title wins. Has the longest win streak. Went on a 9-fight win streak at bantamweight, which is pretty impressive. Beat 3 former champs. UFC record of 17-5. And his other accolades include he has wins in both bantamweight and featherweight, and he's still winning to this day at 36. So Aljo's pretty great, man. Great fighter for a reason. Not likable, but great fighter. Next on the list, Francis Ngannou. Honestly, this guy gets a bit disrespected in GOAT list talks. Like, some people won't even put him, like, top 40, but I believe he deserves to be on here. I mean, he has a great win over Stipe Miocic, who, yes, he has a loss to, but he also has that knockout win over him. Has a win over Alistair Overeem when he was on like a 3-fight win. Like, Ngannou is very great. know. Has great wins over Stipe Miocic, Alistair Overeem, Cyril Gahn, Curtis Blades twice, JDS, Kane, Andrei Arlovsky, Rosenstrike. His only losses are to Stipe and then that staring contest fight to Derek Lewis. Has 2 title wins, has the longest win streak of 6, and beat 5 former champions. 5 former champions. If Ngannou, stayed around longer and Dana didn't hate him, he would have been probably the GOAT of heavyweight. So overall, Ngannou's pretty great, man. Next on the list, Khamzat Chimaev. His great wins include DDP, dominant 50-45 decision. Whether you like the way he fought or not, he beat him 50-45, 50-44 maybe, depends how you view it. Pretty insane. Beat Robert Whittaker, another guy who's on this list, and he choked him out in a round. Pretty great. Kamaru Usman, short notice fight, so I can't count it too much, but Usman will be on this list, and Usman's a great fighter, so has to be on here. Yijing Liang, ranked level fighter. Gilbert Burns, like a guy who was coming off just losing to Usman for the belt, so title level fighter, honestly. Kevin Holland, guy who's always floating around the rankings, not too bad, and then hasn't lost a fight, 1 title win, has the longest win streak of 9, and has beat 3 former champs. Overall UFC record of 9-0. Like, Khamzat Chimaev's tough, man. He's pretty great. And then next on the list, number 19, my boy Charles the Bronx Oliveira. Great wins: Tony Ferguson, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gate, beat both Dustin and Justin. Great wins. Tony, was still a good version of Tony, just coming off the loss to Gaethje. Other than that, was his only loss in like over 10 years, and Charles beat him pretty convincingly in the grappling. Dustin, prime for prime Dustin when he was coming off KOing Conor McGregor twice and pretty sick. And Charles absolutely smoked him. Justin Gaethje, one of the sickest fights you ever see. Charles gets dropped early, but comes back and drops Gaethje in the fight on the feet and locks in a nasty rear naked choke. His solid wins include Darren Elkins, Jeremy Stevens, ranked level guys. Nick Lentz beat him twice, ranked level guy. Clay Guida, Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon, the same guy that beat Paddy Pimblett. Kevin Lee, pretty great fighter. Tony Ferguson also beat him. Michael Chandler twice. Michael Chandler isn't bad. Has wins over Dan Hooker and Tony Ferguson. Beneil Dariush, and the recent win over Mateus Gamrot, which was pretty amazing, man. And his losses, there's a lot of them, but they have context in my opinion. Like, let me explain why his losses have context to him. Lost to Jim Miller when he was very young. I don't follow him for that. Got head kicked by Donald Cerrone when he was like 19 years old. Cub Swanson, another one. He was super young. Frankie Edgar, super young. Anthony Pettis, I believe he missed weight for this fight. It was his featherweight days. Wasn't the same Charles. Ricardo Lama, same thing. Featherweight days, not the same Charles. And then I'd say his only real losses are to Paul Felder. That's a questionable one at lightweight, but oh well. Islam Makhachev, one of the greatest ever do it. Arman Sarukian will probably be one of the greatest ever do it. And Ilya Topuria, one of the greatest ever do it already. So, honestly, not bad losses. 3 title wins, 1 an 11 fight win streak of lightweight, which is pretty impressive. Never beat a former champion, but, And then has a UFC record of 24-11. So, Charles is overall a great fighter, man. Has a lot of great wins, done some great things in the sport. One of the greatest lightweights to ever do it. Number 18, Dricus Du Plessis, DDP. DDP had to be on here, man. I know he has the loss to Chimaev, but I still believe he deserves to be on here. He has a three great wins in my opinion. Has a great win over Robert Whittaker. As a huge underdog, walked in there and absolutely smoked Robert Whittaker, knocked him out in a round. Pretty sick. Beat Sean Strickland twice. Beat Sean Strickland. He was just coming off this insane win over Israel Adesanya, and then beat him again. In more dominant fashion. So. Then also beat Israel Adesanya as a big underdog. Most people picked Adesanya to beat DDP, and he beat Adesanya. So has solid wins over Derek Brunson. Had to go through some war. That's one of the UFC fights of all time, but he got it done. Beat my bloody ACL's torn out. Beat Darren Till. Beat Brad Tavares. Pretty solid wins. Has one loss to Khamzat Chimaev, who's gonna be one of the greatest of all time. No fault in that. And DDP has 3 title wins, 1 in a 9-fight win streak at middleweight, and beat 3 former champs at middleweight. Like, he's one of the greatest middleweights of all time. I don't care if Khamzat beat him. He's still one of the best. Alexandre Pantoja, number 17. The second best flyweight ever to do it. Let's break it down. Great wins. He beat Brandon Moreno 3 times. He's not on my list, but is a great fighter. Beat Figgy twice. Beat a lot of guys at flyweight and beat him three times. Beat guys like Matt Snow. Not a great one, but it's not Matt Snow was a ranked level guy at the time before he became super chinny. And Pantoja flatlined him, so pretty sick. Mano Cop, beat Mano Cop in his debut. Not the best version of Mano Cop by any means, and I think if they were to fight now, Mano Cop smokes him, but that one does age pretty solidly for Pantoja. Alex Perez, another one that guys like Figgy also has, so pretty great win. Steve Urseg, Kai Car France, Brandon Royval twice, like not bad wins at all. His only losses are to Dustin Ortiz when he was a tadpole, and then he lost to Figgy, Figgy, one of the best to ever do it. Askar Askarov, which is kind of a weird fluky loss, and then lost to Joshua Van, if you call it that, by injury. So overall, Pantoja has kind of just been, but ever since that Figgy loss, 8-fight win streak at flyweight, has 5 title wins, was super dominant, looked unbeatable. Like, he's the second best flyweight to ever do it for a reason. 14-4 in the UFC, beat a former champ. Like, I think he has to be here. Next on the list, a controversial one, but Anderson Silva. He is an unk, but he is an unk, but in the unks, they might be in my comic section saying, dude, he beat Forrest Griffin, dude. How can he not? He should be top 5. Let's break it down. So he has one great win, in my opinion, over Vitor Belfort. Vitor Belfort was a former champ in the UFC. He beat a lot of great guys. Lost to some great guys as well, but was a really scary, TRT freak of a man. Solid wins. Rich Franklin twice when he was the middleweight champ. Not bad. Forrest Griffin. I make fun of it, but still former light heavyweight champ. The Derek Brunson win is actually one of his better ones, actually. Because when Silva was an old man coming off a leg break, he still beat a ranked level contender in Brunson, who was like top 5 at the time, so pretty great win. Beat Dan Henderson. 8 and 9 in the UFC, but Hendo was still a tough fight for a lot of guys. Beat Michael Bisping, He who does that's a Bisping, dude. Beat Chael Sonnen twice. Was able to pull off the miracle triangle, and then after, having a doubted fight, came back in the second fight and absolutely put belt to the man. So, and then his losses, lost to he lost to Chris Weidman twice. One by knockout and one by leg injury. But other than that, I don't really count any of his other losses against him. Lost to Michael Bisping when he was 40. Lost to DC on a day's notice. I don't count that for sure. Lost to Adesanya when he was 43. Lost to Cannonier when he was 44. And lost to Uriah Hall when he was 45. So I think Anderson, if you just count his prime for prime losses and his wins, has a pretty great resume, honestly. 11 title wins, tied for the most ever, or not the most ever, but like top 4 most ever. So, was just super dominant for a long time. 16-fight win streak. Beat 5 former champs and overall UFC record of 17-7. I can't put him too high up because he didn't beat the highest level of competition, but I think he falls at number 16. I don't think that's too bad. Number 15, Petr Yan. Just won his belt back against Merab, and that definitely pushed him up the rankings. I'm not going to go full on Lucas Tracy and put him like number 8, but he deserves to be here. Has a great win over Corey Sandhagen. Beat a version of Corey Sandhagen, who I believe was coming off. I don't remember what win he was coming off. I think he was coming off the Murray wins. I think he was coming off the win over Marlon Moraes at the time, where he just spinning wheel kicked Marlon Moraes and got a title shot against Petr Yan. Or actually no, he was coming off the split decision loss to TJ Dillashaw where he got robbed. So basically, yeah, he was on like a 3-fight win streak, and Yan beat Sandhagen very convincingly in his own realm. The striking just schooled him. And then one of the best wins ever, dare I say, Merab Dvalishvili beat Merab when he was on a 14-fight win streak. And absolutely 50-45'd him, dominated him, smoked him in every way possible. Beat him in every fashion of martial arts, man. Like, that is one of the best wins ever. Kind of carries the resume. But even then, solid wins. They're there. John Dodson, ranked level guy. Guys like Jimmy Rivera, Uriah Faber. Some unks, but they got it. Jose Aldo, beat him for the vacant belt. Not the best version of Aldo, but still a competitive version of Aldo who still was pretty good. Song Yadong, a guy who's now went on to be top 5 in the division, so gave close fights to a lot of guys, and Yan beat him pretty clearly. Beat Davison Figueiredo when he was on a 3-fight win streak at bantamweight, and then beat Marcus McGee when he was on like a 3-fight win streak and was undefeated, so not bad. Yeah, his losses, I don't really think he has many, to be honest. So he has 2 losses. So he has a loss to Aljo, in my opinion, 1 loss. The first fight, I don't count. illegal knee. Who counts that? Jan was putting belts to that man. Like, let's be for real. And then he has a split decision loss to him. I believe he lost that fight, but still, I mean, one loss to Aljamain ain't too bad. Has a loss to Merab, but also has a win to him, so it kind of cancels out. They both have 50-45s over each other. And then he got robbed against O'Malley. Anyone with a brain knows he got robbed against O'Malley, so. Overall, his losses aren't really bad at all, actually. 2 title wins. Still needs to get some title wins to be like really up there in the conversation, but he's getting there. Six fight win streak was his longest win streak. Beat 4 former champs, pretty great. And then he has 12-4 UFC records. So honestly, Jan, maybe I'd say the second best bantamweight ever. So pretty great fighter, man. Next on the list, number 14, Israel Adesanya. Maybe a little early for some, maybe a little late. I don't know. Great wins. So who I think Adesanya is great wins. 2 wins over Robert Whittaker. 1 where he knocked him out cold, and then a close, controversial fight beat him. But Robert Whittaker, a guy who's on this list, pretty solid win. A win over Alex Pereira. We're just counting MMA, so in my opinion, they're 1-1 in MMA. So he beat Alex Pereira. He knocked him out. One of the greatest strikers to ever do it. Knocked him out cold. So pretty sick win. And then he has some solid wins too. Guys he defended his belt against. Marvin Vettori, Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier. Pretty decent performances from him. Brad Tavares, an unk of the division, always been ranked. Beat him. Derek Brunson was top 5 at the time. KO'd him. Kelvin Gastelum, broke the knockdown record. Dropped him 4 times. Insane stuff. And his losses, Adesanya, this is what holds him back from being like top 10. He has a loss to Jan Blachowicz, which is not bad at all. Has a loss to Alex Pereira, which isn't bad at all, but still a loss. Sean Strickland, not bad at all. A champion, but still lost to him. Lost to DDP, not bad at all. He's on the list, and then the Imavov fight. So he has 5. Well, he's lost 5 times in his prime, so that's something to consider. He has 8 title wins, which is the second most ever at middleweight besides Anderson Silva, while having a way better resume than him and fighting in a way better era. Has a win streak, a win streak of 9, won a 9-fight win streak, beat a ton of guys. Was the best middleweight on the planet from 2019 to 2023. So pretty impressive. Beat 2 former champs. I mean, UFC record with 13-5. Adesanya's just a GOAT, man. He's goated. He's on the list for a reason, man. He has to be here. Moving on to number 13, Kamaru Usman. So his great wins include Tyron Woodley and Colby Covington twice. So the Woodley fight, it didn't age particularly the best, as Woodley would go on to lose like a million fights after. Still, Woodley at that point was on this huge win streak, and he was off like 5 defenses at welterweight. So, and he beat Colby twice. The first time he beat Colby when he was on like a crazy win streak, like a 9-fight win streak, if I remember right. Like he beat Colby on an incredibly long win streak, and then and he didn't just beat him. So he knocked him out the first time, but he might have been losing on scorecards, so he settled it in the rematch and beat him clearly. So, pretty amazing stuff from Kamaru Newsman. Marty fakes Newsman. His solid wins includes a young version of Sean Strickland. Definitely not a prime version of Sean Strickland, but still a version. Has a solid win over Leon Edwards in like his debut. He has 2 losses to Leon Edwards, so he loses that trilogy in my opinion. But he did beat him when he was young. Damian Maia, professional butt scooter, beat him. Was ranked like forever in welterweight. Beat RDA. Dude, who does that to RDA, man? Dude, RDA rocks. He beat RDA. Beat Jorge Masvidal twice. Hey, bro, who beats Jorge Masvidal like that? Dude. Hey, dude, Jorge Masvidal was in the streets fighting with Kimbo Slice back in the day. Real ones know. But beat him twice. No top 5 level guy. Gilbert Burns was top 3 at the time. Beat him, knocked him out after getting dropped and having to come back. And then still showed he got it as an unk. Beat Joaquin Buckley. 49-46. So, pretty solid wins from Marty Fakes Newsman here. His losses. This is the problem. He has 2 losses to Leon Edwards. I don't count the first fight too much against him because it was a bit of a fluke, as he was winning the whole fight. But the second fight, he lost clear as day to Leon Edwards. So, I don't know what to tell you. And that man's gotten smoked by Carlos Prates now. And Sean Brady. Hamzat Chimaev, lost to Hamzat in a week's notice. Like he arguably beat him, so not too bad at all. 6 title wins, second greatest welterweight ever. Went on a 15-fight win streak, just showed he was super dominant for a long time. Was the clear best welterweight on planet Earth for 2 years. So beat 4 former champs and has an overall UFC record of 16-3. So not bad at all. One of the greatest of all time to do it. Jose Aldo, number 12. Some might say a little high, some might say a little low. Just depends who you ask. But I think this is a perfect placement for him. Fits my criteria. Great wins, has 2 wins over Frankie Edgar. You know, Frankie Edgar, a guy who's on this list, and beat him twice, clearly, very clearly. You know, like 2 very nice wins over Edgar. The second one he got after getting KO'd by McGregor. So I'd say 2 wins over Chad Mendes, a guy who has a pretty crazy resume in the UFC when you look at it. That essentially lost to Aldo the first time. Then he goes on like a 5-fight win streak, just sliming people out. Gets another fight, goes to a close fight with Aldo. So yeah, I think the Mendes fight's a great win. Then has some solid wins. Has wins over guys like Cub Swanson, ranked top 5 level guy at the time. Uriah Faber, Kenny Florian, you know, unks, but guys who were championship level just never won the UFC belt. TKZ, you know, when he was top 5, when he was coming off a win over Dustin Poirier. Ricardo Lamas, Jeremy Stevens. I mean, Renato Moicano when he was an unk. Like, he was a bit of an unk at featherweight, and he was still beating people. Even at bantamweight, I mean, he has 4 wins at bantamweight. Beat Chito Vera, beat Pedro Munoz, beat Rob Font, Jonathan Martinez, top 15 to top 10 level guys at bantamweight. Then his losses are to Conor McGregor. He got slimed, but not bad at all. Double champ. Max twice. Max is on here. Don't worry. Lost to Volk. Not bad at all. One of the goats of the sport. Lost to Jan when he was 35 years old for the vacant bantamweight belt in a competitive fight. Lost to Marlon Moraes, if you want to call it that. It was a robbery. The streets know Aldo won. He lost to Merab when he was 36. And he was getting hugged against the cage, so it doesn't really count as much. The Batista fight was a robbery. He won that fight on damage, if you look at the unified judging criteria. And then he won the Ayman Zabi fight. He got robbed. So really, he only has like 3 real losses. So I think Aldo is pretty great, man. Has 8 title wins in the UFC and 3 in the WEC. So 11 title wins in total, which is crazy. The same amount as Anderson Silva. Has the longest win streak, so 7. But if you count his WEC win streak, then 15-fight win streak, one of the highest ever. Beat 3 former champs. Then the UFC record 9 losses isn't pretty, but when you look at the context of it, it really should be like 14-4. So honestly, I think Aldo's pretty great, man. I think he's done a lot of great things in the sport, and I think he is, you know, top 3 featherweight ever. But you want to know why he's not top 2 and number 3? Because Max Blessed Holloway, baby, my number 11. So let's break down his great wins. He beat Aldo twice. He was a top 12 fighter ever to do it. One of the best ever. And beat him convincingly. He knocked him out twice. Pretty sick. Beat Dustin Poirier when he was, you know, had to fix the trilogy. Showed he's the better fighter. Beat Dustin Poirier. Knocked out Justin Gaethje as a huge underdog. Absolutely schooled Big Rufus. And his solid wins. He's beat all kinds of guys at featherweight and light. Featherweight mostly, yeah. Cub Swanson, Jeremy Stevens, Ricardo Lamas, all ranked level guys. Former champion Anthony Pettis beat him for the interim belt. Knocked him out. Pretty cool. With a nasty boxing combo. Beat Brian Ortega when he was undefeated. Took his undefeated from him. Beat Frankie Edgar when he was an unk, but still a good version of Frankie Edgar. Then some ranked top 5 level guys he beat when they were top 5. Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Arnold Allen. All these guys are top 5. Arnold Allen was undefeated in the UFC until he ran into Max Holloway. Beat TKZ in his retirement fight. Not the best version of TKC, but still a decent version. Would have beat, you know, a lot of ranked guys. Losses. Has 2 losses to Dustin Poirier. If you want to count it, I say the first loss is a tadpole, so really they're 1-1 in my opinion. Got robbed against Dennis Bermudez. Watch that fight and tell me that he lost that. The judges were smoking crack. Lost to Conor McGregor as a tadpole. And then he lost to Volk 3 times. That's tough. But Volk is one of the greatest ever, so it doesn't hurt that bad. And then got slimed out by Ilya in a fight that was competitive, and Ilya Taporia is one of the greatest as well. So overall, Max has 4 title wins at featherweight when he was young. Was the best featherweight on planet Earth for 2 years. Went on a 13-fight win streak at featherweight, which is one of the longest ever. Insane win streak. Beat 4 former champs, and overall, you know, 23-8. And his resume can just get better. Depending on how that Charles and Max fight goes on, he's gonna be in some he's gonna be in some conversations to say the least if he beats Charles Oliveira. But Max is pretty great, man. We need to stop disrespecting Blessed, man. He's done a lot of great things. Now moving on, number 10, Khabib Nurmagomedov. I might have poked a nerve with this one. Some people might not like this, but let me explain. So he has three great wins. He has three great wins. He beat Conor McGregor, top 25, top 25 fighter ever, double champ. Beat him convincingly, submitted him nasty. Submitted Dustin Poirier when he was on a good win streak, like a 5-fight win streak, not bad at all. Beat Justin Gaethje when he was on a good win streak, coming off an interim title fight over Dustin Poirier, great win. Then his solid wins, Thiago Tavares. People forget, man, Thiago Tavares was a ranked level guy at 55 and 170. Michael Johnson, hey man, people forget Michael Johnson was like top 5 at this time, so beat Edson Barbosa when he was, spinning head kicking everyone. Beat Ally Aquino, which people want to make fun of that one, but Ally Aquino was on like a 4 or 5 fight win streak going into that fight. And the RDA win, this is one win that I feel is very, overrated. Is RDA's legit lost to everyone in the UFC, if we're being so for real. RDA's legit lost to everyone. In his prime, he was losing. He's losing now. He was losing when he was losing in his tadpole days. He's always lost. Like, come on. He was a UFC champ, but he wasn't that crazy. He lost his belt to Eddie Alvarez, who's one of the worst champions ever. So, and then Khabib, obviously no losses, 29-0, longest win streak, one of the 13-fight win streak in the UFC. Beat 2 former champs, and then overall is a UFC record 13-0. So flawless record, but just didn't ever beat like that one like all-time great like top 10, top 15 level guy to cement him as like this guy's in the conversation for the GOAT, because he's not. But Khabib's an all-time great for sure. Super dominant. Only lost 2 rounds in his whole fighting career. So, number 9, Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight GOAT. Let's break down this resume. This resume is crazy. Beat Daniel Cormier twice, in a trilogy. Got knocked out the first time, but came back and beat him twice. Won that trilogy. DC, a guy who will be here in a couple spots. All-time great fighter. Beat Fabricio Werdum when he was on a huge win streak, coming as the UFC champion, coming off beating Cain Velasquez. And Stipe Miocic just caught him with the right hook and absolutely bing bop boomed him in the first round. Beat Alistair Overeem when he was on a big win streak, got dropped early in that fight, but came back and knocked him out. Showed toughness, showed heart, showed the heart of an all-time great. And then, he has a knockout loss to Francis Ngannou, but he beat him as well. He beat him 49-46, maybe 50-45, depending how you view it, just by using his wrestling. Then his solid wins beat guys like Roy Nelson, top 10 level heavyweight, Mark Hunt, top 10 level heavyweight, Andrei Arlovsky, when he was, in the title eliminator. Beat JD, has a loss to JDS, but also has a win over JDS, so that cancels out. And his only losses, he lost to Stefan Struve when it was a fluke. Everyone knows it was a fluke. He lost to Stefan Struve as a fluke. And then, he lost to Junior Dos Santos, got that one back, and then has 2 wins over DC, even though he has a loss. So, and he has a loss to John Jones when he was 42, so if you want to count that. I don't, but and he was a PED cheat as well, so who cares? And a Doug. He's a cheating Doug. Who cares? Francis Ngannou. And then he has a loss to him, but he also has a win over Francis Ngannou. So has 6 title wins, won a 6-fight win streak at his peak, and then beat 6 former champions. That's crazy. 6 former champions. Like, people really need to respect Stipe, man. People won't even have him top 15 these days. You're tripping, man. Beat 4 former champions, has 4 great wins, or not 4, 6 former champions. Has 4 great wins. Has a bunch of solid wins. Never really lost a fight, or I'm not saying he didn't ever lose a fight, because that's not, but never had a definitive loss that this stinks on his resume. So Stipe's pretty great, man. Number 8, Merab Dvalishvili, the bantamweight GOAT. So Merab is a pretty crazy resume if you look at it. So he, like Stipe, also has 4 great wins. Umar Nurmagomedov, was 19-0 heading into this fight. Khabib's cousin, and Merab, beat him 48-47, close fight, but dominated him in the later rounds, so pretty sick. Has a loss to Peter Yan where he got 50-45, but also has a 50-45 win over Peter Yan, so that's pretty good. Has 2 wins over Sugar Sean O'Malley. When Sugar Sean was the UFC's biggest cash cow, when he just beat Aljo and Chito Vera and was the UFC champion, he beat him, and then, he did it again. He finished him. He showed he's the better fighter, by far. Beat Corey Sandhagen, another guy who, other guys is a great win for guys like Aljo and Peter Yan. When Corey Sandhagen was on he just beat Figgy, so great win for him. And then solid wins. Has guys like Jose Aldo. Stalled him against the cage, and it was boring as dirt, but he beat him, and it has to be on here. So knocked out Marlon Moraes. That's crazy. Merab actually knocked out Marlon Moraes. Hey, Henry Cejudo also has that win. So just saying. He also has a win over Henry Cejudo, old version of Henry Cejudo, but beat him, not bad. And then John Dodson, who was a ranked level guy. His only losses are to Frankie Sens, which was a robbery. Everyone knows Merab won that fight. And then Tadpole lost to Ricky Simone, where he tapped in the last second when he was like 20 years old. And he has a loss to Peter Yan by 50-45, but also 50-45 him. So until we see the trilogy, I think they're 1-1. And then the longest win streak he went on, 14 fight win streak at bantamweight, was the most dominant fighter in the world for a time. 4 former champs beat, and overall was 13-3 UFC record. So pretty great fighter. Next on the list, number 7, the double champion himself, the cheeseburger man himself, Daniel Cormier, DC. So great wins. DC has 2 wins over Rumble Johnson, who never lost to anyone else at light heavyweight. Legit just slimed everyone else out. That included guys like Gus, Glover Texera. Like Rumble was doing them all dirty. And he fights DC, and DC dominates him twice. Finishes him twice, I believe. So pretty great wins. Has a great win over Stipe Miocic. Obviously lost that trilogy, but still has a great win over a top 10 all-time guy. That's pretty insane. Like, I think that's pretty nice to have. Has what's it called? And then his solid wins, has a lot of these as well. Solid win over Frank Mir, top 5 level heavyweight at the time. Made his debut, beat a former champ like Frank Mir. Roy Nelson, a guy who's a staple of the heavyweight division, beat him. Volkan Oezdemir, a guy who's still ranked at light heavyweight to this day. Like, that's crazy. Volkan Oezdemir is still ranked to light heavyweight, and DC beat him. And Volkan Oezdemir is still like a top 8 light heavyweight in the world. Derek Lewis, a guy who still wins nowadays. I know he's just coming off that weird loss versus Waldo, but beat Derek Lewis when he was on like a 6-fight win streak for the vacant title. Beat Dan Henderson. Beat Hendo, a guy who got guys like Anderson Silva also has on the resume. Alexander Gustafsson. I think this one's very overrated in my opinion, as Gustafsson is an 8-9 record in the UFC. And his best accolade is essentially losing close fights, so I don't really care about him much. Has 2 losses, the PED cheat, the Duck himself, John Jones. Lost to him once, the second fight doesn't count, obviously, because John Jones popped for PEDs. And he lost to Stipe Miocic twice, but also has a win over him, so not too bad. 6 title wins, 7-fight win streak, former champs ever beaten. He's beat 5 former champs. UFC record of 11-3. He's a double champ that defended both belts. Only him and Henry Cejudo can say that. So, I think that because I think he has a similar resume to guys like Merab and Stipe, where you could argue them above him. But I think once you put the double champ defended both belts in there, that's where he goes over him. So, DC all-time great for a reason. He's a legend, man. Number 6, Ilia Topuria. Call it too soon. Call it whatever you want, but just hear me out. He has 3 great wins. Alexander Volkanovski, who will be here on this list very soon. Max Holloway, a guy who was already on this list. Charles Oliveira, one of the greatest fighters to ever do it on this list. The best three wins you could ever ask for, just beating some of the all-time greats right there. His solid wins, Yusuf Zalal, a fight that aged incredibly well for him. It's crazy, Zalal is now a top 7 featherweight in the world since Ilia beat him. Like, that's crazy. Josh Emmett, when Josh Emmett was top 5 in the division coming off, I believe he might have been coming off the Yair loss, but he was still top 5 in the division, just fought for an interim belt, and Ilia Topuria smoked him, 50-42 him, or something like crazy like that. Bryce Mitchell, submitted the grappler. Like, come on. Has no losses. Has never lost a fight. Might never will. Like, that's crazy. 17-0. 3 title wins. Not the most amount, but when you have 3 title wins over Volk, Max, and Charles, doesn't matter that much. Longest win streak, 9 and going. It's going to keep on going. And he's beat 3 former champs. Has a UFC record of 9-0, and he's a double champ. So, Ilia Topuria is, one of the greatest to do it. Ever do it. And he's already one of the greatest to do it, and he ever do it, and he still has more to do. It's crazy. He's gonna fight Justin Gaethje and then Arman Tsarukyan. Let's just say he wins those fights. He's gonna be in some conversations, to say the least. Now moving on to number 5. This might be controversial, but Alex Poatan Pereira. I think he deserves the spot at this point. So his great wins: Sean Strickland knocked out Sean Strickland, which aged amazingly as he go on to go on a big win streak and win the belt in like less than a year after getting that KO win over Strickland. So Strickland will go on to be middleweight champion and beat Adesanya. Has a win over Adesanya. Also has a loss to him, so they're 1-1, but still beat a top 14 fighter ever, in my opinion, in Israel Adesanya. 2 wins over Yuri Prohaska, a guy who, besides Alex Pereira, was legit never lost in the UFC to anyone else, even got close. Yuri Proska is a legend. My bad, my mic cut out there. Yuri Proska is a legend, though. He's done a lot of great things in the sport, like, you know. And Alex Pereira's 2 wins over him. Jan Blachowicz, a guy who's on this list, who he beat by decision. Got grappled, but showed his takedown defense and outstruck him on the feet. Magomed Ankalaev, a guy who was on a huge win streak at the time, and Poatan smoked him. So then his solid wins include guys like Jamal Hill, former champ. His solid wins are former champs. Khalil Roundtree, top 5 level light heavyweight. Losses: Adesanya, a fight that he got back, or he has a win. He already has a win over him already, and Ankalaev, who he lost by close decision while injured, but then came back and knocked him out. So I'd say that aged pretty well. 6 title wins. Has won 6 title fights in the UFC. In 12 UFC fights, he's won 6 of them are title fights, and he's won 6 of them. Longest win streak he's won 5 fights in a row. He's beat 6 former champs, and he has he's a double champ. So I don't know. Alex Pereira is great, man. One of the best there is really to do it. So sorry, my voice is messing up. This is like an hour long video. So yeah, Alex Pereira is great though. Next on the list, Mighty Mouse, Demetrius Johnson, number 4. The GOAT of flyweight. His great wins include Joseph Benavidez, Joey B, beat him twice. I already talked earlier in the Figgy bit about how underrated he is, but, only besides, losing to DJ, he only lost to, like, Figgy and Dominic Cruz, so pretty great resume. Has a win over Henry Cejudo. I know it was a bit of a tadpole win, but Henry Cejudo would go on to become a double champ, so I say I aged well for him. Then solid wins. Got John Dodson. His only loss in flyweight is to DJ. Like, legit, the only time John Dodson ever lost in flyweight was to Demetrius Johnson. John Moraga, solid ranked level flyweight. Chris Carriasso, solid ranked level flyweight. Horiguchi, he was 7-0 in the UFC besides this fight. And now get this, he's back in the UFC and he's top 5. Like, if he wins the belt, he's going to be a great win for DJ for sure. Like, now he's back in the UFC and he's 35. And DJ's old win from 10 years ago is now top 5 in the flyweight division. That's crazy. Beat Tim Elliott, a solid vet. He's been ranked forever. Ray Borg, solid ranked level. Not bad at all. His only losses, he doesn't have a loss in my opinion. Henry Cejudo, he was robbed. Everyone knows he was robbed. Henry Cejudo was stalling, and in the judging criteria in 2019, stalling doesn't win you fights when Mighty Mouse is clearly outstriking him. Dominic Cruz, he was working construction and undersized. Like, come on, dude. Then he has 12 title wins, which is the second most ever, besides GSP. Like, that's great, man. Won on a 13-fight win streak, beat one former champ, and it has a UFC record of 15-2. Just genuinely one of the most dominant fighters to ever do it. Like, Mighty Mouse is a go to the sport for a reason. Next on the list, number 3, breaking in the top 3, we got Alexander Volkanovski, the goat of featherweight. So his great wins include Max Holloway 3 times. He beat Max Holloway 3 times. And every time he got better. Or I guess the second fight was close, but the third fight he 50-45 Max Holloway. Like, come on. Jose Aldo. He beat Jose Aldo when he was 30 years old, 31 years old. Like, he beat a very good prime version of Jose Aldo, who's top 12 all time in my opinion, and beat him very convincingly. Brian Ortega was 14-1 at the time, was top 3 in the division, and Volk absolutely smoked him. So, besides the submission attempts, Volk won every round of that fight. TKZ was coming off a win over Dan Ige, and at the time TKZ was top 5, so not bad at all. Chad Mendes, a top 5 featherweight ever. Like, not the best version of Chad Mendes that Aldo and Frankie Edgar fought, but still a great version of him. Or not great, but a solid version. Darren Elkins. Dude, who does Darren Elkins? Darren Elkins was on a 6-fight win streak. Like, come on. Diego Lopez, 2 times. He beat him 49-46 in the first fight, and then beat him 50-45 in the second time. Diego Lopez is a top 3 level featherweight who could go on to become champ after Volk's done. Like, that's crazy. And Volk beat him twice. He lost 1 round to this guy in 10 rounds of fighting. He beat him 9-1 in 10 rounds of fighting. Get that straight. And then his only 2 losses, or his 3 losses, I guess. He lost to Islam twice. The first fight, very competitive fight. Gave Islam up a weight class, a very tough fight. In the second fight, pulled up in there with a beer with a lean gut and you know on a week's notice. So who cares? Ilya Taporia, got slimed out by Ilya Taporia, but Ilya Taporia is great, man. So it doesn't age bad at all. 8 title wins. I mean, do I have to say anything more? 8 title wins, 12 fight win streak, 2 former champs beaten. That's the GOAT, man. That's one of the greatest to ever do it, man. Volk is one of the GOATs, man. I love Alexander Volkanovski. He's my bald GOAT, and I can't wait to see him defend his belt even more. He's gonna beat Mobzar, and he's gonna have even more resume staying power. So let's just keep it going. Number 2, the second best fighter to ever fight in MMA, Islam Makhachev. So his great wins. He beat Volk 1.5 times. We're not calling it 2 times. We're calling it 1.5 times because the second time, hey bro, you know what you did, buddy. That was on short notice. But the first fight he beat Volk convincingly, 48-47. He beat Volk, a top 3 fighter to ever do it. He beat Volk, so that's all that matters. Charles Oliveira, top 20 fighter ever, beat him, submitted him, knocked him down and submitted him, beat him in his own game. Dustin Poirier submitted him when he just coming off the win over BSD, and still submitted a very good version of Poirier. He put up a very good fight. Beat Jack Della Maddalena, JDM, one of my favorite fighters, a guy who was on this insane 17 fight win streak, hadn't lost in 10 years, and Islam 50-45 and dominated him. So his solid wins include Dan Hooker, top 6 at the time, still in the division cooking, and submitted Dan Hooker, made him scream with a Kimura, made him beg for mercy. Thiago Moises, finished him, top 15 level guy. Drew Dober, top 15 level guy. Bobby Green, top 15 level guy. Arman Sarukian, he was a bit of a tadpole as it was Arman's debut on short notice, but since then Arman's gone on to win every fight since then in the UFC, including the Gamrot fight. Yes, he got robbed. Then his losses. Oh yeah, he lost to Pantoja. Automatically disqualified from the GOAT debate. He lost to Pantoja. He was fluked when he was young. It sucks, but it happens to the best of them. Then he has 6 title wins, and then he has on a 16 fight win streak. Get that right, 16 fight win streak. You know who else, the only other guy to do that? Anderson Silva. Do I need to say more? He's beat 3 former champs, has a UFC record of 17-1, and now he's a double champ. So Islam Makhachev could be the GOAT of the sport, but he's not for one reason, and it starts with a G and ends with a P. GSP. That's my GOAT. Number 1 all time. Georges St. Pierre. Let's just break down this long resume. So his great wins. He beat BJ Penn twice. BJ Penn, who's a guy who was super dominant, was like the MMA prodigy at the time, and GSP dominated him twice. Or didn't dominate. First fight was close, but he won, and then the second fight he finished him, so made him get stopped in the corner. So beat Matt Hughes twice. He's a guy who barely missed this list, but still top 35 all time. One of those unks has 8 title wins or something crazy like that. So definitely has to count for something. Carlos Condit, a guy who dropped him with a head kick, but was able to basically win every other round of that fight and just dominated Carlos Condit. A guy who arguably probably should have been UFC champ during his career. Had a robbery fight against Robbie Lawler where he beat Robbie Lawler convincingly 4-1 and got robbed horrendously in one of the best fights ever. So basically beat a future champ in Carlos Condit. And then Michael Bisping, make fun of him, one of the worst champs ever, but GSP moved up to a weight class, fought a guy who fought at 205 at one point and smoked him. So that has to be a great one with the context. His solid wins are crazy too. Former champs, Sean Shirk, that's a former lightweight champ. GSP finished him. Josh Koscheck beat him twice. At one point, beat him coming off a 5-fight win streak. Beat John Fitch, who's one of the most underrated fighters in his total of his UFC. He went 15-2 in the UFC. Come on. Or he went 14-2 in the UFC, only losing to GSP and lost to Johnny Hendricks when he was an unk. So not bad at all. And then Thiago Alves was on a 7-fight win streak going into that fight, and GSP dominated him. Dan Hardy, a guy who GSP 50-45, who was on a 4-fight win streak. Matt Serra, a guy who knocked out GSP, but GSP came back and finished him. Nick Diaz, the guy who broke BJ Penn, dude, from Stockton, dude. He's a gangster, man, real gangster. He beat Nick Diaz, the guy that broke BJ Penn. Jake Shields, former Strikeforce champ, just former champs everywhere. And his only 2 losses are to Matt Serra, which he got back, and to Matt Hughes, which he got back twice. So, doesn't matter. 13 title wins, the most in UFC history by anyone that never popped for PEDs. 13 fight win streak, Beat 8 former champs, WEC, Strikeforce, and UFC. Beat guys across multiple organizations that were champions and beat them all in the UFC. So, and overall UFC record of 20-2 and is a double champ. GSP is really just he's the status for greatness, man. Great dude. Yes, his fights were a little boring, or they were boring, but he is, in terms of pure resume, he's the GOAT. So I think Islam could catch up, but for now it's GSP. So anyways, this is a very long video, probably the longest video I'll ever drop. Hope y'all liked it. Please show the support as I just spent an hour and 10 minutes talking to myself in my room. So please do that. Please like and subscribe. And anyways, I'll catch y'all on my next video. Peace.